Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you can be here today. Alongside, I've got Jan with me today. Hey,
Hey,
Jan.
Steve. Hey, everybody.
So, we, um, we're going to go back to the economic, the pricing of how things were, years back. This time around, we decided to go a little bit out of sequence. We decided to go ahead and talk about one of my favorite decades. It was my childhood. I was a preteen and a teenager and a child during this decade, the 1980s. This should be a fun decade. It makes me think back to the times of the pastel, bright, flashy colors, the big hair, the jewelry, the earrings, just the fluorescent colors, just all of that. So, Jan, from what I understand, you've conjured up some questions or some
Well, I conjured up some numbers, but before
numbers.
that, I just want to mention that I was 21 years young in 1980. So I wasn't always 65, just for the record. And actually, on another platform where people know I like music, just because I like music from the 60s doesn't mean I'm 75 or 85. I'm just saying. So I was in my 20s in the 1980s. And let me tell you, it was a fun decade. One of my favorites. All right, Steve, I want to mention to you and to everybody, guess what the average median price was for an average home back then? Okay, you're not just going to pop a number out of the air, but I could tell you $47,200. Not bad. If anybody purchased a home back then and still has that home, you really hit the jackpot. I'm just saying. And you know what, Steve and everyone, this is based on the size of a car. The size of a car in about, I would say, the early 80s, 80 to 82, was on average. Remember, these numbers are average prices, was $10,509 roughly. Okay, even though I've said the nine, that's what was written on this research. So I would say between $10,000 and $11,000, and that's bumping it up slightly. Okay, for a compact car, from my brief memory of checking, it was about $7,600 for a smaller car. Not too bad. Um, Now, this, Steve, I'm going to throw this question out for the viewers. Take a guess, which was the top song of 1986? Top popular stuff you would hear on the radio, the top song of 1986. Maybe you want to take a minute for that, and later on throughout the broadcast, we could mention the name of that. So, in case you're just wondering, and this one was a ton of fun to check. The cost of a 1 pound loaf of sliced white bread in 1980 was a mere 50 cents. 50 cents. Hello. And Steve had mentioned to me about the price of ground beef back in the day. Would anybody want to take a guess at that number? Uh, what was the price of ground beef? It didn't specify a sirloin. It didn't specify like 90, 10, or anything like that. Back in the day, from my recollection, when you saw ground beef, it just said sirloin or ground beef on it. It didn't have back in that time, from my recollection, in, let's say, 1980, 90, 10, or 80, 20. I don't remember that. Maybe it existed, but I don't think so. I think those numbers came about, the proportion of the fat to the meat, for example, that came out way later than 1980, in my recollection and in my opinion. And by the way, Steve, before I throw it back to you, can you ever imagine me wearing a huge perm? I look like Harpo Marx. Nothing wrong with Harpo Marx. He was one of my favorites. but I couldn't wait to get the perm out of my hair. It was very 80s, not to mention white capezios and green illuminated socks. Yes, I did wear those too. Steve, what says you about all that?
Well, let's see. Let me think back to my fashion because I was in, elementary school, junior high, a little bit high school in that time. So I would say, let's see. What do I remember back about the 1980s? I remember the brand Gitano,
Yes.
so popular. Bugle Boy, all the boys had to wear it back then. Um, let's see, Bugle Boy.
Dockers
I think that came a little later. That was closer
later?
in the 90s, yeah. But that was like when I was a little older. But Doc, yeah, there was a tennis shoe called Airwalk that was popular. British Knights. Now, back in my time, today it's just a normal brand. Fila, Fila.
Yes.
Well, back in the day, back in the 80s, if you wore Fila tennis shoes, you were like in the in crowd.
Yes.
But that to me, feel don't get me wrong, Fila's not a bad brand, but I I wasn't. Oh, I'll tell you another shoe that was popular. I wore them when I could, afford on affordability. Reebok was real
Reebok.
popular.
I was just going to mention Reebok. Yeah.
I wore Reebok. In fact, I wore those well into my middle latter teens as well into the early 90s when I reached 18. But I wore those too. But there's a lot of I'm probably leaving out a lot of other brands. I think British Knights was another brand of tennis shoe.
Wow.
I'm probably leaving out a few brands in between there that
Did I ever tell you about my shoe mishap, a fashion mishap at a dance? I was in the Poconos
mm,
vacationing on a weekend up in the Strickland Mountains.
you lost a shoe.
Oh, this was really, really funny in the heart of the 80s. Okay. And I was wearing, oh my God, I had the big Bozo the Clown hair going on.
Yeah.
So I had my not white capezios on that night. I had on pink medium heel shoes with white and pink polka dot socks.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very 80s, very 80s.
Oh yeah.
A lot of pink on that night. I looked like a bottle of Pepto Bismol that night with big hair.
Okay.
So,
That's cute.
the true story. So, remember the song Let's Hear It for the Boys?
Yeah, Denise Williams from Footloose.
Okay. So I'm dancing when I get started to dance, I get started to dance. I love to dance. I'm not great at it. I have a lot of fun with it. That's all.
Right. Yeah.
So I was in my 20s. I was very spirited. No, not drinking. I don't drink. Even back then I didn't drink. I just
Yeah.
love fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm dancing. Now remember that part of the song in the middle of it? I forgot. La da 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 da. Boom. The boom part, I lifted my leg up in the air and my pink shoe, not only did it slip off my foot, it flew across the dance floor. And I was this close to hitting somebody in the head with a heel. Yeah, let's hear it for the boys.
I know the part of the song that you're talking about. It's right.
Yes, the middle of the song.
There's a part of the song in the middle where it kind of goes instrumental.
Yes.
You know exactly. Yeah,
There's
because
like a little pause, and then you hear boom. And at that exact moment, my innocent pink shoe from the 80s was a projectile, unexpected. Mortified. I'm like, I'm hopping around with half of a polka dot sock, my bozo, the clown hair, and Pepto Bismol outfit, looking for the shoe. Thankfully, it remained intact, and I was able to hobble back to the cabin.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
Talk about an 80s moment.
Yeah, to mention though, you know, Footloose was one of not the first one, but one of the first record albums I bought as a child because I had gone seen the movie with my dad. And let me tell you, the Footloose soundtrack is that has that song on it. Footloose has got a lot. If you're looking for a very 80s sounding soundtrack, that's definitely one to check out.
You
If
want to melt the years away and forget the troubles of 2024? Go for that. Yes.
right, let's go back to 1984, which is a totally different world than what we got now.
Heck
You
yeah.
know? Um,
I'm so grateful for those fond memories, but I couldn't forget that night.
right. No, that's a good story, but I like the fact that you mentioned that you look like a Pepto bottle of
I look
Pepto
like a
Bismol.
bottle of Pepto Bismol. I bet a lot of women might remember a lot of pink outfits. Nothing
Oh
against pink
yeah,
outfits. I love pink. But back then, it was kind of like Overkill, which was, by the way, a great song in the 80s, too.
Men at Work.
I
In fact,
love the Men at Work sounds.
right. I was listening to because I like to listen to American Top 40 on iHeartRadio, Casey Kasem. And I didn't hear Overkill, but I heard It's a Mistake, the other one they had. And Men at Work, they weren't around too long in the 80s, but they definitely had a few,
They
a few,
bombarded us with like a ton of sound in about a year or two. Am I right?
right, they kind of right. Men at Work, gosh, so many.
Down Under was a great song.
Down Under, that was another one. Who Can It Be Now, right?
Look at It Be Now is great. Oh my word.
Um,
The
and the
music
thing
in
of
the 80s was phenomenal, Steve. Can't get away from it.
no, and what I'm glad about the 80s on my part is I'm glad that I had a chance to grow up in a decade where you could still understand the words of a song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not like the later stuff you heard, some of the later stuff, well, I don't even want to get into that. And you know,
I mean, I wonder if half the viewers would ever have known that, you know this, of course, that I, love Def Leppard,
oh,
metal
Love
music.
Bites. And
Yes.
in fact, I was listening to Def Leppard yesterday. It wasn't Love Bites, it was one called Rock of Ages.
Right.
Oh yeah, Def Leppard. When I think of the '80s, That's one of the first bands going to pop in my head is Def
Heck
Leppard.
yeah.
MTV when it was a real channel,
Yes.
not like
Yes.
what became. Because if I don't see Martha Quinn and Nina Blackwood and
The
Mark
real stuff.
Goodman or
And
Kurt Loder and all them,
Kurt
no.
Loder. And you know what, Steve? I remember a very fond memory. Like my daughter was, like she was a baby in 79, but like in about 84, so she was like 4 or 5, and would be coming home from kindergarten, after school, many times like, okay, let's watch MTV. And
Uh
we
huh.
would just sit on the couch hanging out. Well, yeah, let's get MTV. We would just hang out and watch the videos. How many of you folks out there did that with your kids? I bet
Well, I wasn't. Well, I was a
well,
kid
you
of them.
were one of the kids back
Yeah.
then, so that's really awesome.
Yep. Let's see, back in that time frame, I used to like MTV. Soul Train was a favorite.
Yes.
I did like American Bandstand. Most people don't know this, and I'll share it with everybody. Yes, I thought very much of Dick Clark. In
Yeah.
fact, I also liked him on his game shows, like the 10 and the
Yes.
25,000 and the pyramids. That was a good. Um, but I always liked American Bandstand because I always envisioned myself as Dick interviewing the artist. As a
Yes.
child, that was like what
That
I
was
always
huge. There was no YouTube. There was no,
no.
like that was like if you caught that moment like once a week, that was the moment. You're right, Steve. Good point.
Yeah, Saturday was a lot of good stuff. I mean, several hours. Of course, I would watch my cartoons as a kid, um, and then I was just glued from the in front of the TV from like 9 o'clock until like early afternoon. I was just
That's the way it works on Saturday when you're a kid. Well, at least in our lives anyway. You sound like a very close resemblance of what I used to do. I would get up, but this was when I was, like a decade earlier in the 70s, and my stuff like the Land of the Lost, stuff of that nature.
Mhm.
shows
Those
like
are good.
that. And
Mhm.
of course, HR Puffin stuff, late
Mhm.
60s, early
Yep,
70s. That's the
yep,
stuff I was like watching early in the morning. But then I'd stick around and wait for my American Bandstand and Soul Train. Heck yeah.
yep.
Then I went out.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause, well, I've always been a music nut anyways. I mean, I really am, and, Bandstand, Soul Train, those were 2 important to me. Oh, yeah, Saturday was like Steve Day for television,
Heck
especially in New York.
yeah.
So,
And in the 80s, who could forget Madonna's stuff, Madonna sounds? I mean, that was
um,
amazing, just amazing music.
okay, speaking of Madonna, remember back when the girls used to like to dress like her?
Yeah, they tried following suit. Well, she was a big influence on fashion back in the 80s, that's for sure. Yeah.
Well, you know
Mhm.
what? Madonna, when it comes to her music, I'm all for her '80s stuff. I'm big on the
Yes,
'80s period.
me too.
She started whenever she right after she come out with the song Vogue, even though that's 1990. When she come out with the song Vogue, a little bit after that,
Yeah.
she started to thin out for me. Um, you know,
Well, her music kind of like grew up, like more mature music, and maybe some people were looking for something else, or they just, yeah, everybody just starts going their own way with certain tastes. I mean, I agree with you. Like the Madonna stuff that I liked was in the 80s and mid 80s, and after that, it was kind of like, there was like one tune that I loved that she did, and I think it was 1990 called Frozen. That was absolutely one of my favorites.
okay. Mhm,
But honestly, Steve, I was a Cher buff. Okay,
mhm.
so I mean, I remember when Sonny and Cher was Sonny and Cher back in the early middle 60s. Then they in the 70s they had their show. But even though when she branched off away from Sonny, her, great artist, great talent,
Yeah, Cher back in the '80s, she had a few songs that were pretty good too.
right?
Like let me see what is If I Could Turn Back Time, even though that was
Right,
late '80s.
right. But still
Um,
80s.
I Found Someone, which I love to this day. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think what else.
Who could forget her in the movie Moonstruck? I mean,
Right, that was that. Yeah,
acting, talent, hilarious, the whole package. That movie was funny from start to finish. And if you're part of that, the culture of that movie, which was my heritage, you really laugh because you really get the it factor on some of the jokes in the movie.
yeah. No, now she did put out some darn good movies back in the '80s. The Moonstruck was good. She did one with Meryl Streep and Kurt Russell called Silkwood. That was in the early '80s. That was
Right. A lot of
pretty good.
great movies in the 80s. That we're on the subject of movies for a minute. They're like, what's the first movie a lot of people remember? Back to the Future. How 80s was that? How about all those
Yeah,
Brat Pack movies that came out in the
The
80s?
Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink,
Exactly.
16 Candles, St. Elmo's Fire.
Right. Dirty Dancing. Wasn't that like about 87, 88?
Yes, and back when that movie came out, I had just turned 13 years old. I was right around the time I turned 13. I was trying to get somebody to take me to see that movie. For some reason, I wanted to see well, I've seen it
Well,
many
because all the
times.
kids wanted it. Because when I was teaching, like my sixth grade class, all I kept hearing was the buzzword "dirty dancing, dirty dancing,
Yeah,
dirty dancing." I kept hearing it all the time. I said, I really better go see that movie. So, what do these kids want to watch? But it
yeah.
was quite interesting. What I loved about that movie, and I think what people loved about that movie was again those look back movies. Yes, even though the movie itself came out in the 80s, it was a look back to what? What decade?
1963.
Amen and amen. There you go. A lot of the look back stuff people love. We even had that in the 70s. There were a lot of look back stuff from the 1970s. People would wear funny t-shirts like with like cartoons from the old days, pictures on them back then. That was like a huge thing in like 75, 76 to wear a t-shirt with an old timey cartoon. What was that lady's name? Betty Boop. And a
Oh
Betty.
yeah, yeah.
Remember that Mickey Mouse? All of them, all of them. So people love look back stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you think back to the 70s was a big decade to influence back on the 1950s because look what came about. Happy Days for one.
Yes,
Then you had Grease with Olivia Newton-John, and
true.
that I think that took. I think the time frame of that was probably about the year of your birth, probably about 58, somewhere in that
Yes.
ballpark. Um,
May I remind the audience? Late 58, like December.
yeah,
Almost a bit of 59, baby.
almost. If you'd have been born a little later. Yeah. I would say American Graffiti, but that was 62. That was a little bit,
Yeah,
but there's not much difference really between the early 60s and the late 50s. It was a very the times were similar. Here I am talking about I wasn't even around, but I know chronological times. That's why.
right. And the information was out there too, Steve, and you're an observer. So you heard a lot of stuff. You heard a lot of sounds, wonderful music. You know stuff I never heard of. So he goes, remember that song from 1950 something? I'm like, no.
And I remember you saying, "Do you know?" She's, and then you came back and says, "How do I know? How do you know? How do you know that?" Well, remember, music to me has no age. It really doesn't.
That's
Not
true.
only does
It's
it have not
timeless.
no, and I don't discriminate when it comes to music.
No,
So I
no.
mean, my musical taste is very eclectic. I have been known to shock a
Excuse
few
me.
people. Oh my God, you know this? I'm like, well, yeah. What's wrong with that?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. That's what I love about music. It's timeless. It's everything less. You could just jump in and enjoy music. You don't feel happy one day, put on a little bit of happy music. With all the nasty stuff that we're bombarded with on the news, whatever the decade, put on your favorite music that makes you feel good. Put on feel good movies, music. We have them right here for free. I just have to throw in that freebie idea
the
tip
freebie idea.
on this platform.
But you know what? Coming back to your 1986 question about the song, "That's What
Oh, I'm
Friends Are
glad you
For,"
brought that up. Yes.
most people don't realize this. That's actually a cover. The original of that song was done in 1982 by Rod Stewart, and it was featured in a movie called Night Shift that Ron Howard directed that had Henry Winkler in it and Shelley Long.
So we give them more hints because we didn't tell them the name yet.
Right. But I wouldn't have never guessed that song though. When I think
I
1986,
didn't know
which is,
about what you just said about Rod Stewart. Amazing.
yeah. Well, his version of the song is nice too. It really
I
is.
got to
But
hear that later. Really
yeah.
point. Yes.
Um, but 1986 is one of my favorite years musically for the 80s. It
Yeah, I
was.
loved 86er music. I agree.
But I would have guessed something along the lines of maybe Whitney Houston because she was real popular that year. Got
That's what I was thinking, that it
um,
was going to be the Whitney Houston tune. No, but that was later on, the one I was thinking of anyway.
yeah.
So anyway, the answer to the question, what was the most popular pop tune in 1986? Ta-da! That's what friends are for.
Yeah, by Dionne Warwick and, a bunch of other.
I like that song. I'm just telling you my opine. I like that song. I didn't love that song. So I'm
Yeah,
in like one of the, and I love Dionne Warwick. I love her work.
yeah.
But that song was like, eh. I love a better song for me in 1986. Every time I hear it, I think it was 86. There's something about you.
Level 42.
I love
Level
that
42.
too. That was a Janet song.
That's a that no, that's very 86 right there. Yep, yep, yep.
Yes. Every time I hear it, I think 86. But don't get me wrong. I mean, Dion's work is gorgeous, but that particular song, I take my song better. But that's me.
Yeah. Now remember, Dionne Warwick was Whitney Houston's aunt.
Yes, what a family of talent.
Yeah.
So, Steve, but 1985, you and I both realized what the big hit was in 85.
Well, remember you had a lot of people. You had like Farm Aid. You had USA. Oh, I'm about to give it
That's
away.
okay, say it because it wasn't a guessing one.
Yeah, USA for Africa, which is the one we're talking about.
Yeah.
We Are the World.
I mean, the video itself, the official video, which, by the way, can be found on this
Okay. You,
platform. If you want to feel really good again, watch that. Some of the artists are no longer. And, it's like you sort of gives you a little chill, like, oh my gosh, I'm like, they're not here anymore. But the message was beautiful. The message itself was beautiful.
yeah,
Not like all this junk we keep hearing every single day, bombarded. I like to take a break from it. That's why I'm so glad you went this route with the decade thing, Steve. There was a second question, and thanks to Steve, I got this answer. Steve, if you want to reveal the answer, how much was a pound of ground beef? It didn't give measurement of fat
no,
versus ratio like today.
well, remember back in the 80s, this is before, if you remember, once upon a time, you didn't have the fat ratio. If you wanted to know the nutrition facts of certain, that wasn't there. You didn't have it. That started later in, maybe like in the early middle 90s, I think all of that popped in. According to my figures, although I think it's a little steep, but then again, it varies from place to place.
That's right.
It
It might
said
be
it
a
was
comfortable number in New York, but it may not be a comfortable number in Florida.
right. It said it was $1.39 a pound, but I don't know what grade of meat that is.
Right, exactly. I thought I'd looked it up as sirloin, but I could be wrong. But I thought it just said ground beef on the thing. So $1.39. Let's call it the average price. So I'm
Average
thinking a
price.
little wiggle room either way would work. Does anybody remember what they used to pay in their location for a pound of ground beef or
Yeah.
sirloin back in 1980, 85, whatever? Let us know in the comments section.
Yeah, because I'm a little finicky though about my meats. Usually when it comes to ground beef, I like to stay 85% on the
Mhm.
lower end.
Yes.
But if I find a good deal on the 90 or the 93,
Hmm.
absolutely, I'll definitely consider making the purchase. But
By the way, don't forget to smash down the like button for Steve. It's really important. Don't forget to
yes, I
smash
would
it down.
much
In fact,
appreciate that.
as soon as I get to watch this, I'm going to smash it down myself.
Okay, yep. I wish I could smash the button down for myself, but I think they would probably catch on to that. But
Well, actually, the content creator is allowed to smash down the like button
oh, we are.
after it's published. Sure, why not?
Oh, here I am.
It's like somebody's able to vote for themselves, for example.
Okay. Well, here I am
There's
on.
nothing wrong with it. If I like my video, I'm going to smash down the like
Well,
button.
that's good to know because I've been on this platform as a creator now coming up on 4 years.
Can't believe
I
it.
never knew that. I thought if you vote against yourself, it was disqualified.
Not against yourself. You're pro yourself, smashing down the like button.
Okay. Well, I'll go over and start thumbing me up
Of
then.
course, smash down the like button. I know you feel modest about it, but
Yeah.
you did the work. You're satisfied. I mean, you wouldn't upload something you're not happy with. That I know. I know that for
Oh
a fact.
no.
Yeah. If I don't
No.
like something of myself, I'm not putting it on. I'm not.
There
Yeah.
was a video that I did the other day. In fact, I almost went back and redid it.
Yeah.
But I stopped and thought, nah, nah, I'll leave it. I'll leave it alone because usually if you go back and record it the second time, the second one can be worse than the first. Do you really want to go through that? So I just said, no, I'll leave it alone. I'm just going to air it with the first, record. And it did okay. It's doing all right.
Good.
But
Good.
but you have to be careful. Sometimes when you go back and record the second time, it's worse than the first, and you can't go back and
I know. I totally get the it factor on that. Now, Steve, is there something different on the bottom of your ticker, or is that the same ticker as the last one? Amazon gift cards are also welcome.
welcome. If you like
Yeah.
to send, please
You know,
slip
that
them.
really, not to bring it up again, but that really is a great option for those that don't know, for Steve. If you want to send Steve an Amazon gift card, he never asks for anything. And He's semi partially monetized. The real trick is for Steve to hit the 1,000 subs. So I urge anyone who enjoys this channel or my channel to, without hesitation or doubt, click subscribe and keep it that way. I'm sorry. It's
Hmm.
really important. Steve needs to hit 1,000 subs. He doesn't really need that many. What are we at now? At about six something or other?
Yeah, I'm about 355 or six
All right,
away.
it's
I'm
in
not
the
too far
mid
away.
300s way before you hit it. This would be really, really wonderful. And for content creators who are viewing this, a really huge favor to me would be to share some of Steve's videos like this on your community tab. I constantly share people's videos. I have
Hmm.
no problem with it. I love doing it. I just think it's a wonderful courtesy. But that's just the way I feel
I
about
think
it.
so.
Steve, congratulations on you're almost at near 500 videos completed or
Yeah, this video right here, the one that we're doing presently, this will put me at 490, so I'm only 10 away.
490 videos. That's pretty darn good.
Yep, 490.
Congratulations.
Mhm.
You'll
Thank
let
you.
us know when you hit the 500, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Um, with the way things are going, because I'm usually uploading about 3. I might slip a 4th one in there somewhere, maybe. I might hit the 500 mark before the end of June. It depends because we're only in the middle right now. We're only in the middle.
You mean the 500 video mark?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Oh,
So if I'm at 490, all I need is 10, 369, and I've got it. And then if I slip an extra in, that makes 10. So,
and also, not to be like repetitive, any super thanks is more than welcome for Steve up to a point, because then at some point he may decide to not do super thanks, but
right.
continue on with the Amazon gift cards. That's a continuation. Amazon gift cards all year long. But Steve may have reached a quota or will reach a quota soon where he wants to stop super thanks. So now is your opportunity. If you haven't done a super thanks for Steve, it's a very simple process. Just go below the video. You're going to see a little teensy weensy heart. All you have to do is click on the heart and it gives you the instructions. It can't get any easier than that.
No.
And Steve, may I borrow your channel for a minute? I wouldn't mind a super thanks either. I'm
Right,
just saying.
right. Hey, a super thanks. I mean, they're fabulous. They're great. We both like them because what I like about the
Use them for the business.
right, I like the super thanks and I like the Amazon gift card. What that's
Right.
showing me, and I know you as well,
Yeah.
even though you've been on here a little bit longer than me, um, it shows recognition for what we do and what we put out.
Yes.
It shows us appreciation because, you know,
And we
we
have
have
to pay for this platform that's in the upper right hand corner of the viewer
StreamYard.
with the little S on there. Yeah.
StreamYard.
So it helps us get along. And, it's embarrassing sometimes to ask for things. It really is. It could be embarrassing. But then I thought about it. I'm like, no, Janet, why are you embarrassed? You provide a service every single day, twice a day. So once in a while to ask for super thanks is not a big deal, in my opinion.
No, it's not.
I'm just saying.
Mhm.
Steve, thanks for having me here. This was a lot of fun. I could go on for like 3 weeks on the 1980s.
Oh,
It's,
me too. Me too.
did you wear anything unusual back then, or that you recall, like a style of clothing, or was there anything really strange back in the day? Or
Not really. I mean, I had the jean jacket, like,
yeah, the
if you know.
guys got away with it, where the women had to wear a lot of like bold stuff.
Mhm. Well, I had my days of, believe me, I've back then when I think back, I definitely used my share of Aquanet hairspray. Remember Aquanet?
Okay. Oh wait, you just reminded me, Steve. This product, Stiff Stuff
Yep.
hairspray.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I loved it. I wish it was still around. When you use this product, Stiff Stuff, right after you blow dry your hair, it kept your hair frozen in time, but it didn't look like it was hairsprayish. Like
Right.
the 60s hairspray looked gluey, not Stiff Stuff. Amazing. I
No.
don't think it exists anymore.
No, I don't. I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. Stiffs. Yeah. Right, because if you're not careful with hairsprays, it'll leave a residue and
Yeah, this one doesn't even look residue anything. It looks exactly the same. But one thing though, when you touch it, then it felt like a helmet. Honestly, I'm not even kidding you. It looked natural, but it felt strange.
I never used it, but I think somebody in my family did.
Like in the 1960s, for a minute, everyone remembers Dippity Doo.
Dippity doo. That's yeah.
It's still, I think that still exists.
I think that one's still around.
Imagine.
Now, I'll tell you something. This is not an 80s product, but I wore it in the 80s. I used to use something in my hair. If I was not using Aquanet, oh, you'll love this. So here I am, junior high. I'm probably about 13. Vitalis.
Ouch.
Now, Vitalis is not an 80s product. That goes back
That
before
goes
that.
back to like forever ago.
Thank you. But
Well,
I wore it. I used it in my hair. My dad, being of the 50s, he said, "Steve, get you some Vitalis. Put that on. It'll make your hair look." He wasn't lying, but
no, it
um,
was a good Wait, before we go, Steve, I want to mention that who recalls this? We can't forget our beloved microwavable popcorn, I think first appeared on the shelves in the 80s. Microwavable popcorn.
Orville Redenbacher.
That was the one?
But I also remember Pop Secret too.
Top secret. Yeah.
And if I remember right, in the earlier years, again, you can go back to this platform and look it up. If you remember an actress, she just did a show called Young Sheldon, Annie Potts.
I remember that name.
She was on Designing Women. She was the redhead.
Oh, yeah.
She used to do Pop Secret commercials back in the day.
No kidding. Wow. Good
Yeah.
old 1980s food. Yay.
You remember the 80s, Whitney's yogurt? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
don't get me started on Whitney's.
Yeah,
That's why I love that Noosa. That this is not a sponsored ad.
I know.
Listen, Noosa is the only yogurt that tastes practically identical to Whitney's.
I would think so because it's whole milk. It's whole
And
milk.
Whitney's made you feel really special. It was the first yogurt with fancy packaging. It had a gold peel top. It had this like bone white or whatever color special container. It was amazing. I want my Whitney's back.
What I liked about the Whitneys, right quick, and I'm sure a few others will associate, is I like the apples and cinnamon with the walnut pieces on the. Remember the walnuts on the inside?
Yes, you got everything in there. It was
Right,
amazing.
right.
Oh,
Oh no, I ate Whitney's a lot when I was in the 80s. That was like one of my favorite. That one and Dannon before
amazing.
Dannon.
And
Before
the
Dannon.
sizes were way bigger, not
Yeah.
like this, like microscopic size now.
This was back when Dannon didn't care about the fruit on the bottom, when you had a decent amount. It's not like it is now where they get stingy, but back then you had a nice little, a little layer of fruit that they stuck down at the bottom. Now it's not like that. You're lucky to get, just a little bit. But
And that's a reminder back in the 80s, before we do go, a can of tuna wasn't a mere 5 ounce, 3 ounce like today, 7 ounces. That's why I do remember, like when I opened up a can of tuna back in the 80s, I was able to share it with a number of people.
yes,
Now you have to blow it up with a whole bunch of other stuff to get that shit.
in order to yield an extra amount. That's correct. Yeah.
Well, thanks for bringing back a whole bunch of memories, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome. Like I said, that particular decade, because, you know, preteen, teenager, that whole, because the 1980s, I was anywhere from, well, when 1980 started, I was 5. I turned 6 in 80, and I was 15 when the decade ended. So that whole span, that really is my childhood. I mean, if you,
Amazing. I'm so glad.
yeah. All right, everybody. I'm glad that you guys could be here with us on this, and as always, be on the lookout. We'll
And yes, we are going to follow up in the future on other decades like the 60s and the 70s.
the
just so you
70s.
know.
That'll be nice. All right. I hope everybody has a great whatever time of day it is, and I or we will see you back here next time.
Goodbye.